Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Falling Off the Floor podcast. This week we have a special guest, John Padilla. I got connected with John recently just through the ski industry and our connection in the ski industry and mental health. And without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself, John.
Sounds good. Just want to say thank you so much for having me on the pod tonight, and been looking forward to this. Glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah.
Like he alluded to, my name is John Padilla. I'm the founder and operating director here at Mountain in My Mind. We make ski films that are focused on mental health, all different aspects of it in the ski community. And then we go in the fall, we do basically a suicide prevention ski tour every fall. Starts in September. Working on locking in all the dates right now, but you can expect to see it in most major mountain towns near you and some of the smaller ones too. Last year's tour was about 55 stops. Made it kind of all over the world, and I expect more of the same this year.
Amazing, man. It's funny, I've been watching this kind of happen in the background, Mountain in My Mind, and been cheering you guys on from a distance and didn't know a lot of the crew you were working with. And I recently got connected with Benny, and we skied a handful of times this year and have some mutual friends in the industry. And he was like, dude, you got to meet John. Like, you two are trying to do the same thing. And I was like, amazing. So when I had Benny on the podcast, he spoke so highly of you and everything that you guys are doing with the film and outreach and just trying to talk more about this very ignored topic in the ski industry. So I appreciate what you're doing, man.
Yeah, you too, man. I'm glad that we can kind of work together on this too. I think it makes us all stronger together. And I just actually reached out to Drew Peterson about working with him next year too. And I think all of us combining these efforts that have been, fairly segmented for the last couple of years, but there's so much momentum behind them that why wouldn't we all team up and just try and help as many people as we can? And yeah, I got to give a shout out to Benny too. He's the man. We're super grateful to have him helping out. He's been just a vital part of our operation. Always brings the good vibe to the hill too. And you guys are going to be blown away with what you see. What he did in the backcountry this year. He stepped it up tenfold.
Yeah, I'm excited. The way we kind of went into depth when he came on the podcast about you guys going out to, is it Cook City, Montana?
Yeah, Cook City.
Yeah, and he was talking about how there's like one gas station in the entire town, and you basically get around on snowmobiles like everywhere you go. So it was it was really cool to hear kind of the in-depth story behind you guys shooting that. And he gave me like a couple of sneak peeks from the phone clips of stuff he was doing out there, and you guys are doing it the right way. So I guess my question for you is where did this all come from? Where did this start, the idea for Mountain in My Mind, and what has propelled you kind of to the point that you're at today?
Yeah, totally. So I'll start kind of prior to what actually started Mountain in My Mind, and back it up for why I'm involved with the mental health space. I lost my brother Jack to suicide in 2019. He was 15 years old, kind of the last person you'd ever expect, and it rocked my family to the core. I ended up stepping away from college and I was on an academic full ride and basically had to breach my scholarship terms. Also need to give a shout out to Montana State University for letting me stay on that scholarship, because that's what allowed me to get my education. I wouldn't have been in school if it weren't for that scholarship. So I went back, spent about 9 months at home, and together with my family, we created an organization of teenagers that were really Jack's friends, that wanted to get involved politically and in PR to raise some awareness. In 2019, you got to think pre-pandemic, mental health really wasn't being talked about to the level that it's being talked about now. So we really wanted to try and bring some light to that. So we lobbied Colorado's Congress, got a couple bills passed. One of those is in Jack's name. It's called Jack and Kate's Law. And there's people can do more research on that if they'd like. It's House Bill 1221, or you can just look up Jack and Kate's Law. And we did a variety of other things, school walkouts, just to get people to notice, to care. Because like I said, it was really a different environment in 2019. So after that, I went back to school. I was studying neuroscience at the time, and I was dead set on being a physician. And I just kind of had this turning of just fate and desire in life. And I decided, why don't I try something else first? We had a lot of success with Jack Strong, the organization we created, and I really liked the entrepreneurial aspect of it and working for myself. And so basically was in school and bored out of my mind in classes, and just thought, what can I do that could make a difference in my community here in Bozeman, Montana? Because we see Montana, as you know, it leads the country in suicide rates, especially among teenagers. It's not unlike Colorado in that, unfortunately. So I started thinking, and I did a research project for my now employer, helped pay for this, that basically interviewed teenagers all over rural Montana. Almost every single teen that had recently graduated high school participated in the study. And we found that basically that this propensity, we were looking at hey, what's the reason really that these kids are driven to suicide? And why is their mental health so bad? And we narrowed it down to one thing in Montana, and that was stigma. So you got to remember, I don't think that this stigma is still here as heavily today, but certainly in 2019 it was, in 2020 it was there too. So we wanted to try and combat something, and I worked with another team of researchers at the University of Utah who were looking into ski towns, because there's this theory that ski towns had a higher suicide rate. Well, that theory is now confirmed. It's almost 3 times the national average. That's when it clicked for me. I was like, okay, I can take 2 things I'm really passionate about. One is skiing, the other is mental health, and try and create it in a way that's digestible for kids these days. Kids want video content, teenagers, even adults. We want video content. It's easy to digest and consume, that sort of media. So that's how the idea for Mountain in My Mind was born. It took about a year to get all the business workings behind the scenes kind of up and running for that, and raised money. Pretty much every major ski company in the game. I reached out with cold emails on LinkedIn and just on email, see whose contact I could get, but pretty much every major company, ski, outerwear, accessory base, sent something to me at my house, and I was living in this tiny little college house, and our entire living room was full of gear. And we basically auctioned off the gear, did a giveaway for it, where people could buy tickets, and that was what we used to kind of actually create the business, build the budget out to go start making films.
That is fucking awesome, man. That is awesome. That's not a way that I would have thought to approach it, and you made it happen based on what you could get your hands on. Do you think the approach that you guys took with trying to hit that large audience was what made you successful today? And you've got you've got core sponsors now of the film, correct?
Yeah, Line Skis, Fly Low, Zipline, which is a pole and our goggle sponsor this year. All these folks, and Function Wear as well. All these folks have something in common, and that is that they have a leader behind them that is deeply passionate about mental health. And so we had contracts that we could have worked with some other brands, but I just didn't feel that passion there for the movement. And these brands, seriously, I can't say enough good stuff about them, because they're led by people that they truly do care. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's they got to make revenue and make sales, but they were willing to say, hey, you know what, we're willing to actually take a little bit of a loss on this so that we can get this message out, because it's that important to these brands. So, they've just been incredible to work with. There's also another sponsor that's new for this year that's actually outside of the ski world that I'd love for people to be aware of is the Sam Aiden Kindness Fund. Um, it's in remembrance of a young man, Sam, and his family's big fans of the films, and they wanted to donate to help make it more feasible for us to reach a larger audience this year. So in the fall, you'll see a much larger social media and PR push than people are probably used to seeing from us, because we operate on a shoestring budget. When we go out and do these films too, like when we go do premieres and stuff, a lot of times the venues are giving us discounted rates, and that just allows us, we don't make a penny in this. Nobody in the film is paid besides the editor, and a lot of times the editor, every time they're getting paid way less than they would be charging a traditional client. But what we do is take any of the money that's left over after we pay off all of our expenses, and we donate that to a local suicide prevention nonprofit or partner that's working hyper local in the space. So we do that in each place just so that the money kind of stays local, and those people can see it going back into their community. A lot of times the folks we partner with give away free therapy sessions for folks who need us. We're really, really passionate about working with some of those partners. And it's, like I said, it's a passion project for everybody involved. Like I'm sure there's money to be made there, but it's not within our brand's core values.
Boom, we're back at it. So in terms of your upcoming premieres, this is obviously a huge part of you guys having that direct community engagement. So much of what we do in terms of like being creatives or videographers or photographers, you don't get that one-on-one connection with the person that's consuming the content. So what are some of the things that you guys like do at the premiere to connect with people? And I know that it kind of turns into a community event in a lot of ways.
Yeah, our premieres are like, they put the wind in our sails of the entire team. So at every show, you can expect to have either myself or a member of the immediate team, whether it's an athlete or a filmer or an interviewee there. And instead of standing in the back and hanging out in a green room, we all go and we are in charge of greeting people when they come in the door, making sure everyone has got somebody to stand with and a new friend, introducing people together, and also selling giveaway tickets for gear. People really I really like to be there and be like kind of working the grunt jobs at the premieres, because it's so high touch and you get to interface with the consumers of this media directly. And then we have I can't ruin too much of it because our giveaways, people will literally train for the tasks that we make them do, because the prizes are pretty good. But we do lots of like on show, like your classic ski movie premiere tasks to go win a set of skis or win a day of skiing with someone. That sort of stuff gets the crowd hyped up too. And then at the end of the show, we always take a photo with the entire crowd and have them, scream something like "fuck suicide" or just getting people really, really riled up at the shows, and then kind of making sure that they've got a good amount of resources that we always put up on a presentation for like mental health resources. So we like to shout out a lot of the local counselors in that area. And a lot of times some of those counselors will actually include a couple of therapy sessions in the giveaway. So it's kind of a good way for everybody to eat, for lack of better terms. So that's how we interface typically at shows.
That is really, really cool, man. Something that I hadn't seen in the industry yet, kind of similar to what you guys are doing, like Drew Peterson with his recent premieres that he's been doing. There's been this really cool approach of like involving the community. And sure, like since the dawn of ski movie premieres, there's always some sort of crowd engagement. But with these sort of films, they're touching to a lot of people, and giving people those resources, and also being able to like put a face to the name. A lot of times, athletes, skiers, whatever, the audience or the people consuming their media only know them through their social media content or the films that they're in. And having that more community approach, and I've seen your films, there's a heavy aspect to it, and you're you're pushing a message that is so needed. And I think when people consume that, it can like bring up emotions, and in a lot of ways, that's where we start to move the dial in the right direction. So coming into next year, I know you're focused on premiere season right now, but I'm sure you guys are planning for next season already. Is there any big plans that are in the works, locations for shooting? What's coming for next year?
Yeah, next year is going to be an exciting year. So about half the crew is actually moving down to northern New Mexico and southwest Colorado. We've called Bozeman home for 7 years. And just ready to kind of explore a different place for a couple years. So we're going to be shooting down at Silverton, at Wolf Creek in the Wolf Creek Pass area, bringing the sleds, snowmobiles for those who don't know, or snow machines if you're from Alaska, down to Wolf Creek Pass, and then we'll still do our all crew retreat up in Cook City. We've got some awesome people in that town that really they're passionate supporters of the movie. So we'll bring the entire crew back up to Cook City again. And then there's talks. I'm not sure if it's going to happen yet. We're kind of waiting to see on some of the back end details with everybody's work schedules, but there's talks of doing some heli skiing in Alaska. So that would be really cool. It's like a lifelong dream, I think, for most of us. And then just your typical backcountry and your park shoots around Colorado too, taking advantage of some of the awesome park scene out there. And then we always make a trip down to Mammoth and Mount Hood every year. I think next year it'll probably just be Mammoth. And that'll be most of the crew, again, down in Mammoth in the spring.
Awesome. Yeah. Those were actually two things that I knocked off my bucket list this year, was southern Colorado, spending more time in like Silverton, and then I finally did the lifelong dream of Alaska.
Nice.
Yeah, it was life-changing, man. And like all those zones you're talking about, Wolf Creek Pass and Silverton and all those areas, it's like a weird thing because being from the Front Range here, we get so used to like skiing in Berthoud Pass and Winter Park and skiing park at Copper, and you kind of get into this rhythm, and then half the season goes by and you're like, oh shit, like I forgot Silverton exists. So we made a trip down there this year, and boy, that is an endless supply of badass skiing, man. So
yeah,
I'm excited to see what you guys create down there.
Yeah, you'll have to come down and join us for a couple days, or come crash just whenever you want. Got space for you down in Pagosa, so yeah, you're always welcome to join. And yeah, I grew up on the Front Range too, so I totally understand that, like, kind of that rhythm that you get into there. That's initially what drew me up to Bozeman.
Yeah, for sure. What you mentioned that you were the whole crew is making a change. Are you guys all moving together?
Yeah, pretty much. So for those of us who don't know, we try and keep it pretty subtle on screen. But Sarah Dolan and I, she's one of the athletes, been in the first two films, and she's in this one. She does a lot of the filming work. Sarah Dolan and I have been dating for years, and she's got a job down in northern New Mexico. So I'm kind of following her down that way. Benny's obviously Copper-based during the winters, the North American winters. So there'll be most of us over there, and then the rest of the crew is kind of scattered throughout the country. We've got one of our folks, the guy who edited the film last year, Jack Dana. He lives out of Seattle.
Okay.
And then, Jack Clark is up here. Derek Schreiner, he's on the Rogue River in Oregon right now, but he typically calls Bozeman home. I'm not sure what his plan is for the winter yet. I don't think he knows what his plan is for the winter yet. But yeah, so the crew's, we're kind of scattered, but it's fun. And then, we all kind of bounce around a little bit.
Awesome. That's basically how I live my life as well. If I spend too many years in one place, I'm like, all right, it's time. This place has served its purpose. It's time to go check out some new zones, check out some new places. I can't believe, like, thinking back on it, I spent 5 years on the East Coast, skiing ice, shitty snow, but you know, it served its purpose in a lot of ways, as every place does for people. But I'm very much a nomadic person. I literally was thinking today, I was out on a super long kind of gravel ride and I was like, God, I wish I could end this jumping into the ocean. Uh,
Yeah.
and you know, that's one thing that we have to trade in these landlocked states. It's either really good snow or the ocean, and
Yep.
10 times out of 10, I'm choosing good snow.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too. Yeah, I think it's funny, the bounce around and that kind of that lifestyle. I think that actually adds kind of an important piece to touch on mental health related, that is obviously typically pretty under acknowledged. And in ski towns, I think that's part of what has driven the crisis in ski towns, mental health crisis. I mean, people are constantly moving in and out, and you might have this best friend, and then they might be gone 6 9 months later, and that really can change the dynamic of a town. That can change the dynamic of one's perceived community very quickly. And it's something like I know my friends here in Bozeman are worried about, because there's a lot of us that have moved out, and kind of spreading our wings and going other places. And you got to remember to check in on those friends that you've left behind, or the ones that have moved on to other adventures. So check in on those people and make sure that they still feel supported. They make sure that they still have that friend, that can be there for them. Because that's something we see a lot in mountain towns, is people moving in and out, seasonal work.
yeah, for sure. I I've seen it my whole life. Growing up in Big Bear, that's where I was born and raised, and there's that weird dynamic of you either stay there until you turn 18 and everyone's like, we got to get the fuck out, or
Yep.
people stay there for like life, and then the people that stay there, you're only connecting with those seasonal individuals, which can, I mean, it is kind of scary at times. And I, growing up in a town like that, I like look back at it, and the amount of people that struggle with mental health or substance abuse, like, you know, a big part of my story was my mental health was, a lot of it was driven by the addiction, and then using the drugs and alcohol to mask the voices in my head and the depression and the anxiety. I was using that, and you know, for as long as I could. But that is so common amongst my friends, in the little town we grew up in. You know, I talk to a lot of people today, uh, from my hometown. They're like, "Oh, did you hear about so and so?" And you know, whether it's suicide or, you know, overdose or whatever, it's these
Yeah.
these ski towns. It's like you ski hard and you party harder, and in a lot of these towns, like that's all there is to do. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and in the off season, it's grim in a lot of those places. So, I think that's a really important topic, to dive into. Is that, you know, the ski industry in a lot of ways, especially in the world that we're living in right now, there's like this push for this like après skiing, and like
Yeah.
it's been really cool to watch what you guys are doing, where you're putting a focus on the skiing and putting a focus on this commonality of like mental health and substance abuse and people that are struggling, because everything we see in the media or advertising or whatever is all, oh my god, skiing's so amazing, you ski all day and then you can go out with your friends afterwards, and it's like, whoa, like let's focus totally on the skiing, and let's focus on like, no, that's actually not cool for a lot of people. Like
Yeah, I
leaving
can tell
hill,
you, like
it's
backcountry skiing, like anybody who says that they're doing a bunch of après skiing after with a backcountry mission the next day is not a backcountry partner you want to be with. Just
yeah,
FYI.
yeah,
You got to trust that person to save your life, and if they're fighting for their life with their hangover, um, bad decisions get made in an instant, and that's how people get hurt. So it's, I think too, it's it's part of the reason why we choose to film in really isolated areas. Like there's no party to go to in Cook City, you know? Like we go back to the
Yeah.
cabin and we play card games and we just have good conversations with each other and, hang out in the sauna. And I think like that, like looking at the history of skiing too, like before skiing really blew up in the 70s and 80s, that was more the European ski lifestyle was a lot less après and a lot more slow down, enjoy the moment, focus on the skiing, prepare yourself to be as dialed as possible for the next day. And sure, it's okay to sprinkle in some fun here and there, but there's days you just got to lock in. And that's something that I think Benny and then Lexi Wright, who joined our crew for this year, really do a good job at demonstrating for the crew. Like you will not see those guys. Lexi's sober, and you won't see Benny crushing beers until 11 p.m. When we're going to go out and ski the next day. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem with media and what kids see in other films and stuff is like they do see a lot of the partying, but you have to think about, do you really think they went skiing that next day? Because I personally, I don't think so.
Yeah. I've had a lot of guests, Benny being one of them, like Olympians, X Games guys. Like I'll never forget Alex Schlope in one of the first episodes of this podcast was talking about the immense pressure that there is at some of these like huge events like at X Games. It's like the event, like X Games goes until late at night, and then all the events that you have to like show up at like 11 p.m. and then you're expected to be back on the hill at 9 in the morning for like practices and stuff. It's actually kind of wild. And like I understand it that a lot of these events, that's where they make money. Like having the like rave shows or concerts or what
Right.
surrounding the event is how you attract people to the sport and attract people to the events. But like as an athlete, like Alex was like struggling with addiction, and to finish an event and all the excitement of like winning a half pipe or a big air or whatever, and you finish the event and it's like, oh, you need to be at the VIP tent to be signing autographs and drinking beers and taking shots with people and like partying. It's really, really crazy to think about. And the backcountry especially, like we are dealing with things that we can't control a lot of times in the backcountry. And I tell that to people all the time. They'll be like, "Oh, can you teach me how to backcountry ski?" And it's like, "Yeah, like I can take you up on some like low angle stuff, and we'll learn about backcountry." But there's people see films or they see videos of me skiing or you skiing or whatever, and they're like, "Oh man, I want to go ski that line."
Yeah.
And people don't understand like the amount that goes into making a line like that possible, and the planning, the training, the commitment, and then to your point, making sure you have like a dialed team. Like if I'm skiing something that could potentially kill me, the people that I surround myself with, I want to be pretty darn sure that that they know every step to take to get me out of that massive pile of snow. And I think that's what creates a lot of deaths in the backcountry is like being over ambitious, and maybe you're not around the right people. Like we just had something crazy happen here in Colorado on Quandary Peak. There was like a huge slide that these 3 kids started. They all dropped in on the North Couloir on Quandary and knocked off this like massive avalanche and took 3 people out below them, and they didn't even stop. The avalanche went and they skied. Luckily, these people weren't buried. Like
Oh my
it
gosh.
went fully. It was a partial burial, but the like Facebook groups and stuff like Colorado backcountry skiers, these people went on a manhunt for these guys because that's another aspect to it. It's like someone told me something that has stuck with me. Like one of my initial kind of mentors in the backcountry has, things that we can potentially start in the backcountry have a way bigger impact than just us. Like, I could have a higher risk tolerance than you in a situation, but I don't want to put you in a situation that could possibly get you killed because I decide to ski something that is maybe not feeling right to the whole crew, and then you knock something off and now you're putting everyone in danger. But
Yep.
the other aspect of it is like, if I knock off an avalanche and I get buried out there, and you can't revive me, either a first responder, search and rescue, or a friend of mine is going to have to pull my lifeless body out of the snow, and like
Bingo.
that's not what I want to be.
Yeah,
Like,
you don't want to
this
burden
world.
somebody that with that survivor's guilt. No, we talk a lot about that when we film and cook, because Cook City it's about as dangerous as it gets in terms of lower 48. It's complex, backcountry terrain at altitude. The weather changes quickly. The snowpack is fickle at best. And it's the whole first day is like basically safety orientation and group decision making. We have a rule with our crew internally that if one person says no or introduces even the slightest bit of doubt, it's a no. Whole crew. Nobody's touching that line today. Don't care if they have the skill level to do it. Even if I personally feel good about it, if one person says no, it's not worth it, because you're in a sense going to end up burdening that person who said, oh man, I knew we shouldn't have done that. So we try to avoid that at all costs. And I think too, there's a lot of interesting nuances with filming in the backcountry, especially with a large crew, that people may not realize are happening before that. But we spend months of the season canvassing the snowpack to go look at every little line that we could possibly see, so that we know every layer that's there. Every little route that we take is meticulously planned out on maps. We've got safety people that are there. Their sole job is to be there in case of an accident. And that might not even mean an avalanche. Like when people are sending corks and dubs and like big tricks off cliffs, like stuff just inevitably happens. And there's lots of times there's trees and runouts, and you have to be ready for all that. So we have all that stuff with safety, and then figuring out where do we put a cameraman too. So you try and have two cameramen and a drone guy. So we usually, like, people are so far away. Like, I don't know if people realize how big some of the lenses that you have to use are for that stuff. And there's a reason we need snowmobiles for it. I mean, these like big lenses. And sometimes somebody has had to climb a mountain that's on, over a half mile away, and they're standing on another peak just to get that shot. And I think that's where drones have revolutionized filming in our sport. But even then, in Cook City, drones aren't always the best option because of the wind and the altitude too. They don't fly that great.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it, like just so much. And looking at the snowpack and how it changes year to year too. Like this year in Montana was our second worst or third worst snow year on record. It was thin all year, which means with a snowmobile especially, you can affect way deeper. And even though there's less snow to move, the avalanches were a lot bigger because they were going to the ground. We had to make a lot of decision-making changes. There's a zone that we always go to in Cook City that's just like, I mean, it's the easiest place in the world to go get clips on, and we couldn't touch it this year. I don't think anybody touched it all year long.
Yeah.
It just takes years to acknowledge, and it's not a sport that you can jump into in a year. Like, I know it's glamorized. It's like, oh yeah, big sexy snowmobile with a ski rack on it, and like there's a lot that has gone into that for that person to be at that point. And that's, I think we as skiers that are out there doing that in a responsible way have a little bit of a responsibility to communicate that to folks, that, hey, like this isn't something that you should just pick up and try, because we certainly did not. And almost all of us had some sort of mentors. Everybody's got years of training, like formalized avalanche training, woofer training, wilderness first responder, or even WEMT, wilderness EMT, that goes into making this stuff happen. It's not something you can knock out in a year.
For sure. And I think that like puts the nail in the coffin, is that like one area, one course is not actually, the statistics show that after taking an avalanche course, you have more people die or have a likelihood of getting in dangerous situations, because you get your head filled with all of this like book knowledge, and don't actually you can't you can't truly learn about snowpack until your feet are literally on it, or you're digging a pit, or someone's explaining to you each and every little nuance of it. And I mean, we had a really kind of crazy situation happen just a few weeks ago. At the end of May, there's a line in Berthoud Pass called the Frankenstein Couloir, up off Second Creek, and we had planned out to film it, and we had a photographer with us, videographer. We're bringing all this gear up into the backcountry, and like we're not using snowmobiles, like we're taking this all on foot up to this zone, and it's a fairly open bowl area with a few options and couloirs, and I had been eyeing this line for probably a year, and it's a no fall sort of zone. Anyways, we get up there and the radar kind of shifted. The storm blew in differently than what models were projecting, and we are walking up to this, skinning up to this line, and this pretty heavy storm moves through, blizzard-like conditions, and there happened to be a hut. The Broom Hut is in that zone in Berthoud Pass, and so we got in the hut, and we had been testing with the snow all day, and we're like, yeah, this thing's a go. And we get into the hut, we're huddled in, the storm clears out when we look up, and like all of Frankenstein's couloir slid, the entire thing, basically down to almost the base layer. Like rocks are poking out of this couloir, and there was a weird kind of ominous feeling in the group that was like, dude, if we would have skied that, like, did that storm affect it? And like, sure, yeah, like strong winds and a new loading event, that proves to show that like 2 hours of some sort of storm can completely change how a hillside's going to react. But yeah, there was like an ominous feeling of like, whoa, did we just get away with one? Like, if that storm didn't blow through, if we skied that, is that whole thing sliding? And those are like signs that I get in the backcountry. I feel like sometimes,
Yeah.
like, whoa, this is way powerful than we could ever understand. And even if everything is pointing in the right direction, you wake up, the forecast is looking good, CIC comes out with the report, things are looking like they're a go. You could even go out there and feel the snow on basically the same aspect, and it could feel good. But that's the power of these mountains, and that's the scary thing about Colorado in a lot of ways, is that so much of this terrain is accessible by car. Like,
Yep.
you can literally park the car, and ski like gnarly terrain basically from the road. And that's where a lot of people get in trouble is, you start getting that mad pow disease and looking out there, and it's like, whoa. And that's what's scary about our state in a lot of ways, is the accessibility terrain that you don't get in a lot of other places.
No, certainly not.
Yeah. So, more kind of off the topic of snow and more into the world of mental health. I know you work within the industry. What is your role within the industry? You mentioned the organization that you work for, but when you're not doing ski films, what's John Padilla doing?
Do you mean like outside of like Ski World?
Yeah, outside of Ski World. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I work for a company called Bark Technologies, and it's actually mental health sort of focus. Bark basically makes parental monitoring apps and a phone that can detect if your kid is having mental health problems, is looking up things they shouldn't be, like porn on the internet, is getting extorted, cyberbullying, kind of all these things that are really awful realities of parenting in the digital age. It's awesome to work for a company that allows me to kind of push that passion for mental health and bullying and bringing awareness for this stuff. in a way it serves 7 million children across the United States. So, yeah, huge shout out to Bark. My team is they're awesome people.
Awesome. And when you're not skiing, what's your summer activities? You a biker? What are your big activities in the summer?
Yeah, I used to be super into mountain biking. I actually broke my pelvis in Utah about 5 years ago now. So I
Oof.
haven't really set foot. Actually, that's not true. Last week, I got on a gravel bike with Sarah, and we did a small ride. And that was my first time back on a bike in a long time. But typically, you'll find me in the middle of nowhere with no service, fly fishing, or on a dirt bike, just hanging out on the river, or banging up some single track.
Awesome, man. I was just talking to a buddy of mine about that the other day, fly fishing. I feel like that's a very Montana activity. I mean, Colorado too. When I think of Montana, it's like a slow-mo clip of some guy like throwing the cast out in the water,
Yep.
on the river. And I haven't spent a ton of time in Montana. Um, I went up to Glacier and I stopped in Missoula and Bozeman, and I've only been in the summer. I've actually never skied in Montana, and definitely need to get that out of the way at
It's
some point.
it's a cool spot. I'll give for you some advice, and for all of our listeners, do not go in February unless you are some weird sadist and just absolutely hate yourself. It is so fucking cold here in February. Like, you think Colorado gets cold and it's minus 20? No, minus 40 air temperature, minus 60 wind chill, and it will last for weeks on end. It's miserable.
Oh
That's
my
when the
god.
locals leave and go to Hawaii.
Yeah, seriously.
I
Jeez,
mean,
that is.
the gas pumps freeze. You can't do anything.
Oh my god. That is that's cold. That is cold. You know,
Yep.
I something that I've realized since moving back from the East Coast is not a lot makes me feel cold after dealing with like a Maine winter. And it's a weird thing because in Maine, it'll get down to like -5 or something degrees, or even just be like 10 degrees, but that 90% humidity at 0 degrees is fucking painful. Like
That's the
it gets
miserable
down
part
to
that
the
they don't tell you about
bones,
Montana.
and
It's humid too in the winter. We're really dry in the summers and humid as hell in the winter, so it's not
oh,
uncommon to see 98, 99% humidity. Even a 10 mile an hour wind, if the air temperature is minus 40, is going to plummet you past minus 60. I mean, man, when I say it is
oh,
bone chilling cold. There's not enough layers to put on. You just stay inside, read a book.
oh man, yeah. Well, thank you for the advice. I am for
Don't go in
surely
February.
I'm going to be avoiding Montana in February. I was planning on going to Big Sky this year or that zone and doing some backcountry, and I got some friends out there, and yeah, like you mentioned, it was a rough year
Not
for
the
you
year.
guys.
Not the year.
Yeah, I pivoted. We had a slow start here in Colorado, Utah, and that's actually when we made the decision to go to Alaska because it was like the faucet opened in Alaska early on and
Yeah.
was, dude, I've never seen so much snow in my life. It was
Yeah,
out of
Alaska had a heck
control.
of a season. My buddy
Yeah.
lives up in Palmer, and he was like sending me photos, and it's like minus 37. I don't even know how it's snowing at minus 30s. That's the lowest temperature snow can fall at, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's just sideways snow piled up behind him too, and he's just trying to shovel out his front door.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty crazy, and I don't know how this worked out the way it did, but the faucet was open in Alaska for weeks. Like we were talking to the locals and they're like, it hasn't stopped snowing in weeks. And we got there and we were there for 2 weeks, and the first week some on and off snow, but we hit basically the jackpot where there was a period of like 7 or 8 days that it didn't snow. So everything in the backcountry like settled up really nicely. and we met some guys out there, actually through social media, that are guides, and they were taking us out for days, like all over the place. Um,
Awesome.
and one of the guys is like in his 60s, and he was like, some of the lines that we skied, I've been eyeing up for 40 years here in Alaska
Yep.
and have never had the ability to ski it. And not only ski it in like fucking blower snow, man.
Awesome.
Some of these lines were, you know, I felt a little bit out of, skiing here in Colorado and these western states, like that's its own beast, but it was eye opening in a lot of ways, standing on top of some of these massive peaks, and you look over and it's like you hear over the radio, the camera dude is it, you're ready, drop, and it's like, whoa, here we go, man. And it's nothing can prepare you for Alaska. That is like a whole new world. And seeing snow stick on mountains at like 55, 60 degrees, that normally that snow just gets blown away in Colorado, Montana, anywhere snow is light. In Alaska, you just look at peaks for hundreds of miles where there's no rocks. You only see snow on these crazy steep aspects that's where those famous spines and pillows and everything that we all see in the big ski movies, like it's all true, man. And it changed my life in a lot of ways. It's those like childhood goals, and to speak on the mental health of it, like there was a lot of years that I was struggling, that all of those goals of like doing things like skiing in Alaska, or not only skiing in Alaska, but doing it with like my closest friends, and the amount of stoke and like love and just absolute admiration of the mountains, and like getting to the bottom of a line and then seeing your best friend come down that. 7 or 8 years ago, I was literally on the streets in Boston, homeless, buying drugs from bad people, doing bad things with bad people, not knowing where I was going to sleep certain nights. Like, to standing on top of those fucking peaks was, yeah, that was eye-opening for me in so many ways. And that was reassurance to me that, like, and I hope to the people that like watch my content or listen to this podcast, that like, yeah, it's like recovery is possible. You can be at your lowest point, and there are resources. There's people like you. There's people like Drew Peterson, Benny, all these guys that are going so far beyond the skiing and using skiing as the platform to get this message out. And I think that's what's so important about this, that we have found this common ground in skiing and created a platform from it, but that's where we're able to share a deeper message that not a lot of folks in this industry are comfortable with sharing. And
Yeah, I think that's kind of the beauty of skiing in itself, and backcountry skiing especially, is there's so much crossover between that and life. And
yeah,
one example I always love to use, we have a lot of steep terrain here, as is there in Colorado and Utah. And sometimes when you're at the valley, when you're at your lowest point, and you're sitting down by the river, looking up, wondering, how the hell am I going to get up there? You can't even see the real peak itself. And sometimes it's a lot higher than you ever thought it was. And by the time you stand on the peak, sometimes you can't see the river below you either. And you don't know how far you've even just came. And I think that there's so many metaphors that are interlocked in skiing, and there's a lot of beauty there. And that's kind of the focus of this third film, is tapping into some of that metaphor there. And we had one obviously at the end of the last film that I think is important for people to hear too. And that's about the difference between a bison and a cow. A cow, if there's a storm coming, and this is just something, maybe this is Montana of me just to, because we have bison and shit that still roam wild out here, but a bison or a cow in a storm, they see a big storm coming, the cow will run away from that storm 100% of the time.
yeah,
The bison, on the other hand, the whole pack runs right into the heart of the storm. And they do that smartly because if you run into a storm that's moving this way and you're running this way, you actually end up spending a lot less time in the storm. And I think that that's a metaphor for those facing mental health challenges out there. Face it head on, run into it full steam, keep pushing. You're going to be out of it sooner than you think.
Love that, man. Both of those metaphors I've never thought of, and I feel like I'm the king of metaphors on here because it I'm very much like a visual learner, and I've had mentors or therapists or whatever give me small little metaphors like that where I can like visualize it, like you saying that you can like visualize it and look back like, okay, yeah, if I take this head on, I'm not going to be in the storm as longer. And it is really easy to like sit in the shit. It is, you can sit in that shit and you can feel it for months and months and months on end. And there's also an aspect to that, like, that's okay too. Like, it's okay to not be okay. And like, that's a silly metaphor that's used a lot, but it really is true that I think there's this whole idea that if you're struggling in any way, it shows like weakness. And most of the time, I feel like the people that I come in contact with in this world that have struggled and faced these things head on, at the end of the day are much stronger because of it, and have a compelling story to tell. And that aspect of like feeling less than or anything because you struggle with these things, you're seriously not alone. It affects everyone in some capacity in some point in their life will face some sort of mental health struggles. Presidents, professional athletes, politicians, whatever. The mental health and substance abuse does not discriminate.
No, it does not.
You know, I think that the people that actually take the time to face it head on and then to be open about it afterwards, like, that's fucking cool. And you know, it's an inspiration watching what you and Drew and these other guys in the industry are doing because it is so needed. And it's been awesome kind of following along in the background and watching the impact that you guys are making, because this is, as much as people in a lot of ways don't want to talk about it, like, this is a really serious issue. I feel like at times I get frustrated, especially in the world of addiction, that there's so many outside focuses in the world that I feel like a lot of focus goes into things that don't really matter. And people are like, literally every handful of seconds someone dies of a fentanyl overdose. Like, that is insane. And it's not really talked about. Like, it's lightly talked about in the media, and it can feel like a really daunting thing at time, like being in this space that, like, is anyone listening to this? But you guys and the approach that you have taken, like, gives me so much hope for this.
Appreciate that, dude.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
like,
we're not stopping anytime soon, and I'm sure Drew and Benny and Connie, Brennan, like all these folks that have been intimately involved with these films over the years will all tell you, and doing their own thing too. Like Drew will tell you the same thing. You got to keep pushing. It's you got to just keep bringing it up. I don't care if I annoy people. That's fine. The right ones that really need to hear it will stick around just to hear that. And I guarantee you that all of us, we get the DMs on the account all the time of people after the shows just said, "You saved my life tonight." I've never heard it explained in this way. I've always wanted to just have contact with somebody that's involved with the ski film, and that even just that basic human interaction has saved people. That's what keeps us going. That's what puts wind in our sails. Is just keep on pushing forward.
Yeah. And that community aspect, that is,
it's everything.
I preach that. Probably my favorite quote of all time is, the opposite of addiction is connection. And you can use that in so many metaphors. The opposite of mental health, the opposite of depression is connection.
Yep.
And for anyone listening, like there are resources, and sending those messages or receiving those messages, that's what makes all of this worth it.
100%.
At the end of the day, if one person comes away from this podcast and it helped them get through the day, or one person comes to your movie premiere, that's all I need.
Yeah, me too, man. Just that, and don't be afraid to tell people if something's working too. Like, it's nobody is ever going to shut you down for, you saying, dude, that was awesome, or great job at this, or thank you for this. Like, that's on the other side of the coin. Like, that's the best thing that any of us could hear at the end of the day. And it's what keeps movements like this powering forward. And yeah, and want to give a huge shout out to all the folks in the space. You know who you are, Shlopi, Drew, all the folks involved with Mound in My Mind. Thank you guys so much for the hard work and tireless work really that you put into this. And most of all, thank you to Austin for having us getting this together. And I think it's really an important message that you're spreading, and excited for people to listen and to hear what you have to say, because I think you've got a great perspective on life and a lot of things that people can learn from.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's a uphill battle for all of us, and I think we are pushing that dial in the right direction in some capacity, and people are becoming more open to it, and the world is changing in that aspect, that that it's okay to talk about these things, and it's okay to bring these up in your community, or talk about these things with the least suspecting people. Like I said, politicians, athletes, whatever. Everyone's struggling in their own capacity, and having a space to talk about that or have community is huge. So,
Agreed.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm super excited for the listeners to get an opportunity to kind of put a face to the name with you, and I will definitely get everyone connected with your premieres and everything as you guys get dates locked in and stuff.
Yeah.
I'll put some information to get connected with you. I know you guys are an open book, and love
Absolutely.
to connect with the community. And thanks so much for coming on today, brother.